I'm here with Robert DeSena, CEO of Council for Unity. I've been working with Bob for about 50 years, mentoring young gang kids and working for a positive change. Bob, am I quoting you correct when I say that you have said that no one is beyond redemption?
For the most part, I think that there are some people who probably, whether it's DNA or some other predisposition, are not going to be reached. But in my experience, I have never met anyone in the 50 years when I've done intervention with youth in crisis, which I prefer to say rather than gangs or hoodlums. But I've never seen one instance when we weren't capable of getting somebody out. So that's been my experience.
I'd like to focus on some of your success. Back in 2007, when I had an apartment at Trump World Tower, I hosted a party for Council for Unity, and I met Dino Johnson. It's an amazing success story. Would you like to tell the story?
Sure, and I hope you get a chance to interview Dino as well, get his perspective on our relationship. I met Dino up in Ossining, New York. Dino was in a program called YAP, which stood for Youth Alternative Project. They were doing interactions with high school children across the state. Columbus High School, which was completely gang involved, and the Council for Unity was made up of gang members who were at war. He heard about this and asked if we could go visit Sing Sing. I said, sure. They got there as each of the incarcerated men began to talk about what led them to prison. They were waiting for the children to react. As my kids reacted, they said, we don't need to be here. We're in Council for Unity, and our lives have changed. They were stunned, and they asked me, Lee, what is this? And as I explained it, they asked if they could become a Council for Unity chapter in the correctional facility. I said, sure. Dino was one of the guys that was there, and he gave a very powerful presentation to the young people. I said to him, we need you out there. For Dino, it was the first time in his life anybody ever told him he was needed. If you go on the website and look at the Riverhead Prison video, one of the statements Dino makes is, nobody ever told me they needed me. Everybody I know in society is telling me, we don't want you. Stay back. Stay where you at. With that, I played a key role in getting Dino on parole and then getting him out. And when he came out, I hired him. Here's a guy who had 17 years in prison. I hire him. He started out at the bottom. Today, he is the director of program marketing for Council for Unity. He's probably reclaimed over 1,000 lives because he's a credible messenger. He covers my programs in Long Island, and he is a force. He's married. He's got 3 kids. One of them is in college and owns his own home. He went from nowhere to somewhere.
I think you indicated that they're doing a movie about his life.
Not about his life. They're doing a movie about Sing, and he got incredible reviews. People are already saying that it may be Oscar worthy. It's going to be released in July. Dino is one of the principals in that movie. He appears throughout the film.
Just to clarify, they feature Dino's life story in the movie.
Yes, but it's not exclusive to Dino. He's not the only character.
Could you tell me another amazing transformation?
One would be Rick Brown, who also works for me. There was a riot in Erasmus Hall High School. It was so bad, every security guard was hospitalized. It was a conflict between the Haitians, the Jamaicans, and the African Americans. It was really bad. I was called to do an intervention. I met with 85 of the parties who were involved in that riot in the chapel in Erasmus Hall High School. And 2 of the biggest drug dealers in the school attended that, probably to ensure that their interests were not going to be compromised. I spoke and I made a connection with the 2 of them. One guy was called Outlaw, which was Ricky, and the other was called Doughboy, which was Joseph. Not going to give the last names. They were so impacted by Council for Unity that I hired them as consultants, and I got Doughboy a job working in the UFT. I never preached to them. I didn't tell them to quit dealing drugs or doing any other criminal activity. I listened. I am not unfamiliar with the life. Because I didn't judge them, they were captivated by someone who seemed to get them. I got Rick a couple of jobs. Then eventually I hired Rick, and he is an absolutely mesmerizing, charismatic force in Council for Unity. The kids love him. He goes into schools and he links faculty, administrators, deans, guidance counselors, and he links them to the Council for Unity. And single-handedly, he creates a systemic impact through his work. He is an incredible success story from where he was as a teenager. And by the way, Newsday did a full centerfold story on Rick, Doughboy, and me. Today, Rick is not only a Department of Ed employee assigned to Council for Unity, but he's got 3 beautiful daughters, and he's leading a fabulous life. He's happy because he's doing the one thing he's great at, preventing kids from taking the same dark turns that he did.
That's an amazing story. It just makes me say, wow, you're doing great work. I want you to continue your work. I am going to support you. Is there anything that you would like to add before we depart?
I have two other stories.
Please.
If we have time.
Absolutely.
Got called to go to Riverhead High School in Suffolk County. The community was in denial that they had any gang issues at all. The promoters of Council for Unity very shrewdly said, we should probably be proactive then. Let's get Council for Unity so we don't have a gang problem. The fact of the matter is they did. I had to do one of the first interventions that was between MS-13 and the Bloods. The leaders of both groups met with me, and one of them was a young man named Mario Pulak, who was the leader of MS-13 at the time. After the intervention, I got them to shake hands, and they both joined Council for Unity. Mario has had a tortured life. He came from Guatemala or Salvador, I'm not sure. As he tells his story, he was shot at 5 years old. He led a gang life of extreme violence and was wounded, shot other people. His life was on a one-way track to nowhere and worse. He also did interventions for Council for Unity. He was featured in our gang conference, and his testimony was striking. He basically narrated his life and all the disasters that befell him. He said, through Council for Unity, I'm going to change all that. I don't want to go to any more funerals. I don't want to see any mothers crying anymore because their children are dead. I am now committed to preventing that. I'm doing it through Council for Unity. So that was an amazing story. Now he's married. He's got a beautiful daughter. If you saw what he looked like when I met him and you saw what he looked like now, they look like two different species. When I met him, he was angry, sullen, full of despair. Now you look at his face, he's beaming, he's happy, he's leading a good life. And the final story is Charlie Saunders. Charlie Saunders was considered one of the most violent felons in Suffolk County Correctional. The sheriff said, I want him to meet with Bob. I'm bringing him down. Charlie entered that chapel, and he has never turned back. Within 3 weeks, he became another human being. In fact, he discovered his humanity. Just imagine this. You walk into a room, and everybody you're at war with is there. 3 weeks later, you're in a circle where all of you could call each other brothers. So Charlie says, I've been shot 5 times. Everybody in my family has been killed by guns. Then he puts his head down with a very forlorn look on his face, and he says, I didn't have anybody. Well, when he said that, for the most part, I ended up adopting him. Supported him through 14 years of incarceration. He went to some of the worst prisons in New York State, and eventually I got him out. He's been out for 5 years. He's turned his life around. We got him off parole, and now we're working on getting him employment through my cousin Ed, who also fell in love with Charlie, and we got him a union card. He's a laborer. We're now attempting to get him work in New York City, which is imminent, at $50 an hour. So without Council for Unity, Charlie was pretty much doomed. And through Council and through my board of directors, we were able to get Charlie a stipend, got him a wardrobe, covered his rent to get him stabilized. Now he is a citizen who is paying taxes rather than draining the tax base.
Basically, he's a good neighbor. He's the guy that you wouldn't mind living next door.
He's a great neighbor. Charlie's a great soul.
Bob, I appreciate these wonderful stories. I continue to support you. I encourage others listening to support Council for Unity. Bob will be back with us next week when I do another interview.
We should also talk about the uniqueness of the Council for Unity curriculum. A fair question for anybody is, how in God's name did a program that was born out of racial violence, gang leaders who hated one another, how in God's name did it last 50 years? How did it have application in schools, in law enforcement, in corrections, in communities? And the curriculum, to a large extent, is responsible for that. It's very unique.
Let's address that next